say, when I retire, I'm going to do something related to health or fitness. But it was always when I retired, because sticking with my corporate job felt like the responsible thing to do, right?
Angela, I want to start off by understanding your new life a little bit.
I guess I would sum it up with one word: liberating is what my life looks like now.
Thought about jumping from one job into maybe something with a little bit more flexibility, and then eventually out of, corporate support that we all have when we work in corporate jobs. How did you feel about that role as a primary breadwinner when you wanted to introduce some uncertainty to the family?
The risk I took was that the franchise was newer. I thought, I know I can do this for whatever reason, but I felt like I needed a mentor.
This week, we're interviewing Angela Sudbury. After 25 years of a successful career in technology, one day she had the yearning to start helping people improve their overall health. And this month, she'll be celebrating 3 years owning and operating a small training studio in Salt Lake City.
Angela, great to see you.
Yeah, good to see you as well.
Yeah. So, Angela, you and I have known each other probably for over 15 years. I don't want to date myself, but it's been a while. And we've gotten to know each other personally over that 15 years, which is, I think, why we're here today, because I know a little bit about your story. Can you share what a typical day looks like in the gym now compared to when you first opened?
Yes. I guess I would sum it up with one word: liberating. Not to say I don't have challenges, but, for a lot of years I was so used to the rigor of a set schedule and working across time zones, and my personal life very much infringing on my work life. My typical day nowadays looks like sticking around the house a little bit and enjoying my morning coffee for a minute while I think about my day. If I need to meet a client, if I'm trying to do some sort of a marketing project, I set my schedule, right? I set what's convenient for me, and so I know ahead of time like what my day looks like. So I think the biggest thing is having control of my time and then enjoying my coffee for a minute before I'm just jumping in on nonstop Zoom calls. So that feels liberating and honestly quite luxurious.
And Angela, do you work from the house? Do you work from a gym? Walk me through from your morning coffee through to the end of the day.
Yeah. So I do, it's a mix of both. So I definitely like to be in the gym. I mean, that's why I did this, is because I want to be with my clients. I want to be with my team. I want to see all the good success and hear the stories. So I'm definitely in the gym most days. I generally, quite honestly, I usually work my way into the gym around maybe like 10-ish. Sometimes jump into a workout, get to, visit with my clients, visit with my trainer, and typically wrap up there like 1:30-ish, come home, take my dogs for a walk, grab lunch, figure out what the rest of my day looks like. And sometimes I'm meeting a client at night, but it's just fabulous to kind of be fluid and go back and forth with where I'm needed and try to structure my day a little bit myself.
That sounds so refreshing. And, we're recording today on January the 6th, which for most people is the first day back in their corporate jobs. And I'm curious, what did a typical Monday look like for you in your corporate life?
Yeah. Can I back up and talk Sunday night?
Yeah, please.
At some point, my Sunday nights were a little rough as I was thinking about what was coming for the following week, just being very transparent. We have 3 children, so I felt like my Sundays were always getting ready for Monday, not only with the family, but with work. I worked across a lot of time zones I'm in Salt Lake City, so from Salt Lake City to India, and so had to be very mindful of where I needed to be when. Well, I knew I always needed to be at my desk, but, what calls I needed to be on, and so Sunday night just felt really heavy. Right now, I'm like, oh, Sunday night, all good, bring on Monday. And so Monday is just like any other day. I mean, it doesn't feel heavy, it doesn't feel dreadful. It just is kind of like, okay, have to take care of my people, take care of my clients, take care of my team, but then what else do I want to knock off the list? What else do I need to tackle? Monday's like every other day. Fabulous.
I love it. They say liberation is the freedom of judgment from others. And it sounds like you've arrived.
Yes. Liberated is the word. Yeah. Not to say, like I said, there aren't challenges, but man, so freeing.
Yeah. So, Angela, I'm curious, what events led up to the night you decided to leave your corporate job?
Yeah, so it definitely wasn't a night. It was, I did a lot of research, did a lot of, chatting with my husband, did a lot of kind of reaching deep within myself and looking at our finances. I would say, when I retire, I'm going to do something related to health or fitness. But it was always when I retired, because sticking with my corporate job felt like the responsible thing to do. I had some things happen in my personal life that was making it just harder and harder to balance the two. And it really started feeling like I could not give my personal life the attention it needed. I mean, working is difficult. Being a working parent is hard. My husband and I work. We have 3 kids. So I did pretty well holding it all together for a lot of years. Then it just got to the point where I'm like, okay, something's got to give. I was just honestly exhausted. I was trying to give my all at work. I was trying to, give my all at home and hold things together. I was talking to my husband, and he was the catalyst because, I always kind of thought, well, the responsible thing to do would be just to keep doing this and suck it up and get through until I can do something else. And we were talking, and he's like, well, why don't we look at it? Why don't you start doing some research? And that was huge for me. And it was just that I don't want to say permission, but it was almost my personal permission to like, okay, like don't be so rigid about like thinking you have to complete this because you started it. And so that's really kind of where it started.
So, Angela, this is probably the hardest part maybe of this conversation, but why don't you tell us a little bit about that personal challenge that you're dealing with your daughter and family?
It was definitely a big catalyst, and so I feel like it's important to share. So I'm going to also say my husband has chronic illness, and so we have spent a lot of energy and effort, trying to help him stay healthy. But then when my daughter, our oldest, was 12 or 13, she was diagnosed with a chronic illness and went downhill pretty fast. So she became bedridden pretty quickly. She was in 8th grade, kept trying to go to school and then just couldn't. And so I felt like as a mom, I needed to be there. And then it became, we had more appointments, and it wasn't easy to diagnose what she was going through. And so it was just weighed really heavy on us. But also I felt like I needed to put more time into being there with her, supporting, going to a ton of appointments. I was over the top crazy with research. So I spent pretty much all my brain power, all my time trying to help figure out what was going on with her. So it was very consuming at the time. And so I had my husband and my daughter, and then my mom was diagnosed with brain cancer, and trying to kind of help her and my sister, between us navigate that. So there was just a lot going on. And so I think for a couple of years in my mind, I was running out of gas. Didn't feel like my corporate environment was as supportive as I had hoped. But ultimately, I realized, and it's up to me to make a change here rather than wait to see what happens. Maybe I need a refresh. So found a different corporate job, different setting, had a slightly different role. So that got us through kind of the harder times of it all together and working and keeping the family. But then I really just think I was still feeling like I am just out of gas. Like I am just exhausted. I got paid well. Definitely had satisfaction in my job, but I felt like, man, I don't know if I'm making the right trade-offs here. It just felt like I was so removed from the impact of what I was doing every day. That's kind of where the conversations with my husband started in earnest. I mean, they were always kind of in the background, and just recognizing that, this just, although, like I said, I'm getting paid well, this just isn't doing it for me anymore. It's not fulfilling. It's not as satisfying. I'm sort of just doing what I think I'm supposed to be doing. And I will say, between my husband and I was the primary breadwinner. I mean, he has a good job, but I definitely made more, had better benefits. And so that's also a hard position to be in.
Can I ask some questions around that?
Please.
So, as the primary breadwinner, particularly the person that's carrying the insurance responsibilities for the family, you've got a sick child, and you've thought about jumping from one job into maybe something with a little bit more flexibility, and then eventually out of that kind of, I guess, corporate support that we all have when we work in corporate jobs. How did you feel about that role as a primary breadwinner when you wanted to introduce some uncertainty?
Yeah, I think for me, when I'm uncomfortable with something, that usually means I don't have enough information. And like I said, it was my husband being like, dig in, like you should check this out. And then me being, oh yeah, I can do that, right? I can check it out. I did a lot of research on my own because I knew how I wanted to spend my days. I mean, clearly I need to make a living, but I knew how I wanted to spend my days. And that was paramount to me. Kids were getting older, and so things were getting a little bit calmer at home. And so it was just a matter of kind of narrowing down options. So for me, kind of first and foremost, I knew because of this passion I had, I knew mostly what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something helping people improve their health. I'm in my 50s, so what strikes me is like as you age, I mean, staying healthier is trickier when you're 50, 60, 70 than when you're 20 and 30, right? So it was just kind of like, that's where I knew I wanted to narrow it in. And then exercise, to me, mindful exercise is like the first step to kind of getting control of your health and really being proactive. So I knew that was kind of where I want, and that was how I've lived my life. And so I knew that was where I wanted to start. So I took personal training at a small studio for years and years. And so I could work there. Like I was seeing all the inner workings. I knew the owner, knew the trainers, saw when the staff changed, all that turnover. And so I actually approached the owner and I said, hey, would you consider selling? And he said, not right now. And I thought, okay, that's kind of option one. Option two is, could I do this all on my own? And, you think about all the pieces and parts. And I thought, okay, that seems overwhelming having never done this. And so then I kind of in my mind, like, okay, franchise, maybe a franchise is the right way to go. Because what I really felt like I needed was a mentor. I thought, I know I can do this for whatever reason, but I thought I felt like I needed a mentor. And so I started looking at franchises, kind of had my vision of what I wanted to be doing. And so it was pretty easy for me to narrow down potential franchises that I may consider. And then, so I did my narrowing down, did my research, and then I brought my husband in and said, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I reached out to a couple of them. Ultimately, the one I reached out to, I said, hey, interested in chatting. It was a really small franchise that was just kind of up and running. And the CEO, the founder, called me on a Sunday. He's like, hey,
Awesome.
it was awesome, right?
Yeah.
And we talked for 2 hours. And it wasn't like this whole like, hey, let's get you going, the salesy. It was like, the things you care about are the same things I care about. This is why I did this. I introduced my husband to him later, and then we started kind of digging into the financial side and doing our due diligence there.
It's super interesting that you followed the franchise model, because I think that idea of getting a mentor for yourself, that model excels at. I'm going to dig in a little bit more about some practicalities. I looked at some LinkedIn research. About 7% of people that are resigning at the moment are resigning to go and start their own business. Jamal, you called me maybe a year and a bit ago saying, I want to start a business. What should I do?
Yeah, how do you do this?
And we had very different ways of starting businesses. And Jamal's quite settled in with his business now, but I'm really curious about those early steps. And I've done some research into the franchise model. I've seen some of the range of costs for an Ally personal fitness franchise, and they're pretty chunky numbers, and I'd say there's a pretty big range in them as well. So I'm curious, Angela, who helped you prepare your financial planning spreadsheet? Because I'm guessing it took a village to get to where you are today.
It did, but honestly, the franchise provides a pro forma, and the risk I took was that the franchise was newer. And I knew that. So they were going on their 30 years of history running their own studios, but not really, trying to replicate in a franchise model. So that was really the starting point, was the pro forma and kind of playing with those numbers. And so we went back and forth a fair amount with like, this is the target number of clients. How long did it take? How many have other studios? I was the third studio to open, third/fourth. Two of us opened on the same day. And so very limited experience with the franchise model, but a willingness from the franchise to like work with me and figure it out. So we had that agreement early on that like, I'm going to give you feedback that's going to help us both grow, and you help me. So I had really great kind of hand-holding business coaching. So we started with the pro forma, kind of played with the numbers. So we had an idea. My original goal was like, if I can only make what I made salary-wise in my corporate world, that would be great. And then I soon realized, like, okay, let go of that. Because, benefits and everything aside, I think most franchises do provide a pro forma, which, again, to me was reassuring. There's a lot that you both know when you start a business that you aren't thinking about, right? The different fees and licensing and, there's a lot that goes to running a business. And so it was kind of nice to see this line item of costs and kind of what they expected them to be.
So you said pro forma, but I think when you're starting a business, some people don't even know basic accounting things like what is a pro forma, or what's an income statement, or what are your P&Ls. And that's a learning curve. For a lot of us, we had to learn it. So you had to hit YouTube. You had to figure out where do you go for loans. Tell me a little bit about, how did you get to making a decision around the capital that's required to start the business?
We looked at small business loans, and it seemed that it was going to be a longer process. In spring of 2021 is when we signed the franchise agreement. We were optimistically hopeful that we could get open by the fall. So I thought, perfect, we could open right when kids are going back to school and parents are ready to get back to a routine. So we were really thinking that we needed to get the funding pretty quickly. And so I looked at both options, SBA, and then there's a structure called the ROBS, rollover business. It's essentially using money from your 401k to finance the business. And it's generally a quicker process. The franchise had provided me with a provider that specializes in this type of funding. So I vetted it with them, and it seemed more straightforward and it seemed quicker. And to me, it just felt safer. I don't like to have debt. And so I thought, well, versus trying to get my business up and running and have to pay a loan and have to pay franchise fees and everything else, I thought, okay, I'm going to take a chunk out of my 401k and just consider this like investing in my retirement and my quality of life. So there's some ongoing things that I probably wasn't fully thinking through. Not saying I regret this option of funding, but there's definitely things to consider. For example, the tax code regulates that when you use this Rob's rollover, you have to become a C Corp, because the C Corp actually owns the business, right? So it has this 401k owns the business anyway. So there are tax implications. Like people say, oh, cool, you can write off your workout clothes and you can write off your car. And it's like, no, I'm an employee because I'm an employee of a corporation, right? The other thing is I pay a monthly administrative fee to the company who administers it to make sure that I'm doing all the proper reporting. I think, okay, was it the right decision? I've never put numbers to it, but I'm kind of making the trade-off between $155 administrative fee per month versus paying interest on a loan, right? Probably still a good deal there. And then am I shortchanging myself at all by the structure of having to run taxes through a C Corp versus, an LLC or a, S Corp or something like that? I've left it where it is, and it's worked well.
Well, it sounds like you just gave us a great practical first step, which was something that we focused on, which is hire somebody that can tell you about taxes.
Yes.
And how to structure your corporation or entity so that you better understand how cash needs to flow to you into the business.
Yep. I wasn't as deliberate in those steps. I had a CPA, but I went forward with my funding model before I kind of thought through what it could mean longer term.
I've been a global worker for years, and so I don't have a 401k in the traditional sense. I've got my own retirement fund that kind of tracks me around the place, but I've certainly dipped into that as I've needed to make investments in my education, my career, take time off, build a podcast studio. And I think I often hear the traditional wisdom, or when I explain that to people, like, you can never touch your 401k, never, ever touch it. What advice would you give to people who look at their 401k in a similar way of like, this is money for the future and only for the future?
Well, I was definitely of the school of you never touch it. And I've told my kids that forever, like, put it away, forget it's there. Like, don't, just stock it away and don't pay attention. But then my husband's like, this really is kind of paving your way to retirement. This really is how you want to spend your later working years. And just kind of came around to the fact that that was okay, that I'd put that money away. We've been very diligent with our finances. We've saved for college from the time our kids were born. So we were at a point where we're like, okay, we have things in pretty good order. I think this, not only just moving forward with the business, but I feel okay about using this money that I've put aside to, move my career in a different direction.
So Jamal, you bought an existing business, and Angela, you've really built one from scratch. How did you find your first paying customer?
Our studio is really targeting clients who are 40 plus. Doesn't mean you have to be, but really targeting a certain demographic, a certain income level, obviously a certain radius to the studio because you're only going to drive so far to work out. And then I thought, man, here's where my local network. I've got to reach out and I've got to call on all my friends and all the people who I think might fit my demographic, might be interested. I've never done sales before, ever. And it was definitely intimidating, but then I realized that I'm super passionate about this. I'm not trying to just cold call and sell you something. I'm like, everybody needs to be doing strength training, regardless. Like, as you age, you need to be doing strength training. So it became easier and easier to tell my story and just to say like this is a big deal. Yeah. It was a ton of work. So I was the only employee and I was the only one doing pre-sales. So my target was to open in January of 2022. Fall of 2021, we literally turned my digital ads on Black Friday, day after Thanksgiving. And
the most expensive time of year.
Yes, exactly. But I had to get some clients before I could open my doors, right? Not only was it nerve-wracking, but I'm looking at my watch like, okay, you can call me right now. And I'm like, crap, okay. I worked my corporate job through the end of September. I opened mid-January of 2022. The franchise had a requirement of 75 clients before you could open. You don't just open day one and be like, hey, come in, let us train you. We do small group personal training, which is the best model ever. And so that requires a one-on-one meeting with every single client before we open, because we're not just going to willy-nilly be like, oh, hey, come train, everybody's the same. And so I don't even know how I survived from like September to February. So I'm doing sales all myself, doing all the business administration, hiring a team, trying to get my space built out. And then I'm thinking, okay, how do I do these assessments that are absolutely required to do good quality personal training before I even have a space? Luckily, my space got built out with no equipment in enough time to run through all these starting point sessions. So then I brought this young team on. I'm trying to train them on how the franchise wants us to do these starting point assessments. I'm working on scheduling because we go with a set schedule model for accountability reasons. So there was so much going on, and I don't know how I held it together, but I did. So we opened January 17th of 2022. Well, and it was as it was approaching, and I'm trying to plan for grand opening and, share it on social media and all this. And I have this young team that's just trying to learn like the alloy model of training. And, there was just a ton going on. And I hit 65. Oh, so then in January of that year, early January, that's when the second big wave of COVID hit, like the Omicron. And I'm like, oh crap, what have I done, right? So my studio is right by a rec center where they were doing COVID testing. And literally, as I'm like at the studio doing these starting points, my parking lot is blocked because it's so backed up with COVID testing. I'm like, what the hell have I done? What was I thinking here? Oh, gotta plow forward. At that point, I'm like, I have to make this work, right? No choice.
Yeah.
I have to make this work.
Keep moving.
Then it was on me. So approaching our grand opening date of the 17th, I had 65 clients. We'd gotten through the starting points miraculously. My team was up to speed, ready to go. And so I approached the franchise and I said, I have 65 people, not the 75 that you required. And they said, well, I don't know. And I'm like, look, I'm paying rent. My team is trained. I can start collecting revenue. And they were very, very good. And it made sense for both of us to like, hey, we're also new in the process. Let's open it and get rolling and see how it goes. So I opened with about 85% of what I was supposed to. And then that was my focus for months, was just building those numbers up, trying to keep the retention where it needed to be. It was survival for months.
Yeah. But it sounds like you had a lot of training in survival. So the corporate rigor probably gave you the experience you needed to survive that.
It's true. And personal grit, right? I mean, definitely takes a lot of grit, right? And like I said, I had the moments where like, what have I done? And I'm like, doesn't matter. Like, I have to make this work. And my husband was supportive in the background. I had this young team who was doing some things, but I'm like, it is on me.
It is on you.
Figure it out. Yeah. And I did.
How does your growth look now, and how do you feel about it?
My growth is good. I'm always would love more clients, but I've learned so much, continue to learn about the marketing and the sales. And I've connected with different firms. I've connected with a local firm here that wasn't, kind of a franchise preferred vendor. We've made some really good strides on generating organic leads versus the higher intent leads versus, the social media pushing to these leads. And so networking is so important, right? You never know who you're going to meet, who knows more about something than you do or can connect you with somebody. So that's how I met this group. So it's doing well. The business is doing well, but I continue to learn for sure.
Fantastic.
Love it.
Jamal, over to you.
Yeah. So let's get into the purpose and the values, which makes us all feel good. Tell us a little bit about a client that's been with you since the beginning, and what changes have you seen in them since they started with you?
Oh my gosh, I have so many. This is where I just beam. So one in particular, well, I have a couple. So one of them, I get a lot of retired executives or executives who are getting ready to retire, right? And so they've had a successful career. They've put their heart and soul and body into working. And so they needs to be nurtured on the personal side, right? So I had one, she was a tough cookie, worked in the utilities industry, could hold her own against anybody. And she, people are apprehensive. They're nervous. They're self-conscious. And I said, just come on, you got this. I have two stories I'll share. And so she started with me and she came in and, everybody thinks, oh, I want to lose weight. I want to do this. And I'm like, focus on your quality of life. That's what we're going to do first. Being healthy is improving your quality of life, but quality of life is why we're here. We don't all need to look the same. And so she came in just beaming one day and I'm like, what is up? And she's like, went to a concert. We have this great outdoor amphitheater up against the mountains here in Salt Lake City, but you either sit on a blanket or you sit on those little beach chairs, right? And she loved the concerts. And she's like, I have avoided going to these concerts for years because she's like, I am so embarrassed when I have to get out of this beach chair. She's like, I flounder. She's close to 70. She's like, I flounder forward. I'm rolling around. I'm trying. So she's like, I don't go to the restroom. I don't get drinks. And she's like, I'm like, so? And she's like, last night, she's like, I'm sitting in my beach chair. I look around. I'm like, here goes. And she's like, I stood right up out of my chair. Like, no sweat. And she's like, it makes going to that event so much more enjoyable. I'm like, that's why we're here, right?
Yeah.
So you can keep doing what you want to do. So my other favorite story is, just awesome. I have lots of them, but my other favorite story is I have a client who's 83, probably spent her whole life trying to be tiny, and she's just tiny. And so I donated. One of the things I've also learned about kind of networking and sales is trying to give to nonprofits, right? So there are a couple women's organizations I work with, and they're always doing fundraising. So I'm like, hey, I'll donate a month of workouts to help you with your fundraising and then to try to help generate traffic into the gym. And so I donated a month of workouts, and the woman who won it, cutest lady, 83, comes in and she's like, oh, Angela, she looks around and she comes in, she's like, I didn't know this was strength training. I don't think I can do this. I'm like, okay, not only can you do it, but you need to. Mm-hmm. And so she got her first month free. She's been with me for 2 years. And you should see her. Like, she misses a workout. She's all over scheduling her makeup. She's hitting the golf ball further. And the biggest thing is, like, she walks with so much more confidence. Like, she used to kind of be a little uneasy on her feet, and now she comes in and she's like, all right, what's next? Life-changing stuff. So It's awesome.
Well, I took 10 strokes off my game, and I got to say that's the best part of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. That definitely resonates with some, that's for sure.
Yeah. Describe a moment to us when you realized that the gym was just more than a business to you, and that you felt like you now had purpose.
I think I knew it would be that early on. I mean, that was my whole intent, right? But I definitely have primarily female clients. Definitely love my males as well. But I've seen, in my opinion, females struggle with self-confidence quite a lot, or my experience, right? And so I absolutely love it when I can empower somebody to be like, you got this. Like, it doesn't matter where you're starting from. Like, you got this. We're gonna start you based on that assessment. We're going to start you where we need to start you, and you're just going to go from here. So I've had several where I look around the studio. We train 6 people at a time. I look around the studio. There's 6 females in there, all ages, all bodies, all abilities, and I'm like, you go, girls. Like, we got 6 strong women here, and I just feel so proud. I'll tell them. I'm like, love me a room of strong women.
I love watching people who, like, I go to the gym very regularly. I've been focused on my health span. So like you say, like mobility, being happier and feeling alive longer than necessarily just being alive longer. And, it always gives me a lot of, I don't know, there's a funny feeling when I see people around this time of the year who are at the gym. They're clearly not used to it. They are a sweaty mess, but you can see they're putting one foot in front of the other. And it is very inspiring to watch. I can imagine that's inspiring to see every day.
It is. That's exactly right. And their self-confidence just grows, right? I mean, that's huge.
And so, Angela, as we kind of bring the interview for a close, number one, this has been super fascinating. And so I think there's a lot of really tangible things that our listeners can take away, particularly those thinking about starting a small business on their own. But there's something that you talked about before that I think, Jamal and I certainly see as we've been building out this studio, which is the power of networking. And, we named this podcast Stuck. We decided it was a personal finance podcast because who achieves a goal without some financial impact? And so for those out there that are maybe feeling stuck, they've got some of those feelings that you've got, it's too late. Retirement is for when I retire. Building, my next lap will happen only at the end of this one. Mm-hmm. Who are the 2 to 3 people that you think someone who is feeling stuck in their corporate life should talk to as part of their own process to decide whether they are happy where they are or it's time to move on?
I don't know if I have immediate answers for that. I mean, certainly your closest confidant, right? Like, my husband was just huge in like nudging me forward when I hadn't even really considered doing anything different other than just staying the course. I had a couple of friends who were pretty savvy in business, and so I ran the idea by them. And, they were not so much the finances, just like, this is what I'm thinking, these are the trade-offs. Definitely got good support from them, and they kept asking me like, so what's going on? What have you learned? What's it looking like? And then at one point I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm doing this. Like I said, I don't know, like I said, I landed on kind of using the franchise and the founder and his small team as my mentor. I guess somebody who's in this current business. And I think it's all about, it's much easier if you're like friend of a friend who can connect you with somebody who is a business coach, or friend of a friend who might be in this business that you're considering. So I think it is all in the networking, and just try to land with somebody who can give you another perspective. Ask the questions that you're not thinking about.
And it sounds like that mentoring, finding somebody who's an expert and probably a few steps ahead on that path, has been really effective for helping you build out the franchise for sure.
Absolutely.
Angela, I've got one final question for you. What have you learned about yourself that you think other listeners in similar situations would benefit from hearing?
A couple of things. I would say I've always considered myself conservative, right? And so people will say, well, I'd love to make a change, but I think I'm too conservative. I am conservative. I want to plan. I want to know what's next. But I also kind of reflected like, hey, I'm conservative, but I'm also not passive. Like, something's not working, I'm going to figure it out. I always have, right? With whatever it is. And so I think it's that like, trust yourself enough to explore options, kind of get the go ahead. And I mean, you don't have to do anything immediate, right? Explore options, do your due diligence, find a mentor, find some sounding boards. And then the second thing, and I probably knew this, you know, based on especially personal challenges with my family and stuff, but I have a lot of grit. Like, I when you know it's up to you, like, you'll figure it out. I mean, I certainly was relying on other people in pieces and parts to kind of help me pull things to the finish line, but I have a lot of grit. And then I guess the third thing is, I think people connection has always been my strongest suit and most important to me, and this just validates it. Like, it's all about the people you surround yourself with and how you can help each other.
Love that.
Angela, you did great. Angela, thank you so much for your time today. For those of our listeners that are in Salt Lake City and maybe want a little bit of help finding a way of building their core strength and showing up in this world in a happier and healthy way, where can they find you?
So I'm in Holiday, which is kind of mid Salt Lake Valley. Definitely can look me up, alloypersonaltraining.com/holiday, or just put in your zip code. I would absolutely love to help people improve their quality of life.
Thanks so much,
Fantastic.
Angela.
Thank you, Angela.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, everybody, for listening today. If you have anything you'd like to share with the Stuck team, perhaps something that Angela said today resonates with you and you'd like to kind of share something with her or make a comment, or you have a question that you'd like one of our experts to help you with, send us an email or a voice note to stuck@213studios.com. That's the numbers 213 and the word studios.com. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for watching Stuck. If something you heard today resonates with you, or if you have a question you'd like one of our experts, or even Jamal and I to help you with, send us an email or a voice note to stuck@213studios.com. And if you want to find more videos like this, check out our growing library of interviews and expert advice. And please, subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to us and allows us to continue to bring you amazing content. You can also follow our journey and get weekly insights by subscribing to our Substack newsletter. And don't forget to follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Until next time, remember, it's never too late to make a change.